You know, the argument on the other side of this, although as if there could be an argument on the other side, right? But many people say, yes, police shooting has been an issue, police brutality has been an issue. People often tell me that the likelihood of being shot by a person on the street is way greater than being shot by the police. They say that the vast majority of police officers do their jobs well, and these are isolated incidents. What would you say to that, LaCreshia?
I would say that when there is a national crisis around, let's say, a produce that has E. coli or something like that, there's a national reaction to get it off the shelves. It's an emergency situation. We've got to stop everything until the threat is eliminated, right? There has not been a national reaction to police shootings, and what we have is, an unwillingness to really value Black life. So I myself have been a part of the Black Lives Matter movement, not the Black Lives Matter organization, more so the movement. I've been a part of different organizations for the past 4 or 5 years, protesting police brutality. My uncle was killed by the police, and I grew up in a neighborhood that was terrorized by police. And what I see from our government is just an unwillingness to admit that there's a problem. Yeah. Even if 1 or 2 people die from E. coli, but you know that there's a possibility of other people dying, you do something about it, right? Like, why isn't our nation deciding to do something about it? And I know before we got on the show earlier, JuWaun was talking about how there's like no national registry to keep track of the bad apples in the police department.
JuWaun, explain that, because I think that's very interesting, and she brings it up, but I want to explain what you're saying.
Yes, I think a few years ago, when there was like a heightened media awareness around the police killings that were taking place. I think it was, we had Eric Garner, Laquan McDonald, just like a lot of Tamir Rice, so on and so on, Sandra Bland. There was a lot of talk around like how many police shootings were taking place. And I remember reading an article in the Post where they were, pretty much just saying like there is no national registry, there is no national database that keeps track of police officers who shoot civilians, and there's also no requirement for local governments to report how many police officers
so I could
shot
see
civilians.
The gap in the national issue, right? Saying, okay, well, maybe they're not at the national level doing this, but I would assume that the states would keep those numbers, and we're saying they don't. If they do keep them, it's all voluntary, which is crazy.
But we know that the executive branch, sets the standard. So I think that it should come from the executive branch. And this list, or having this national registry, this was something that was discussed when Obama was president. This was something that he had executive power to do, and he did not do that. And it still hasn't been done, So I think that, yes, states can take initiative, and that's good, but what we see is that sometimes, like these police murderers, the police who kill civilians, they travel from state to state and go on and get another job after they've harmed or been fired or terminated, and there's nothing to stop that from happening. So to me, it has to come from a federal level.
Cities can do more too, though, right? So like one thing that cities can do, specifically like Chicago, we have in our police contract right now loopholes that allow police officers to murder civilians, and also gives them additional rights so that they can get a story together, they can corroborate with their partners, and essentially like cover up murders if they commit them as well. So even locally, local executives, local leaders can do more to,
James, I'm going to come to you in a second, but the thing that really got me about the Botham Jean case was that the woman who shot him, Amber Geiger, she was given murder, and so there was celebration across the nation for that. But then she received 10 years and the possibility of getting out in 5 years. Why do you think that we go through this over and over and over and over and over again?
Well, I think I was having a conversation with someone. I said, every city, every state, every county, they have their own judicial system, right? So what may be considered maybe heinous, well, I shouldn't say heinous, but what a crime in LA may only carry this kind of weight, whereas a crime in Dallas or Tennessee may carry this kind of weight. We don't have if you will, a universal, like, hey, here's what you get if you go to jail for this, right? And then 2, it's also left up, the judge has the ultimate decision, right?
They do.
And so I think really the key isn't, we get mad, and you see on TV, oh, I can't believe she only got 10 years, and so-and-so did a crime, took a candy bar and got 50 years, right? And I said, well, it's really up to the judge, right? So if the judge decides that, you know what, I think you need 10 years, then they got 10 years.
Right.
All right, and there's nothing we can do about it. Literally.
But we vote for judges.
Well, I mean, not in Tennessee or not in another state. That's what I'm trying to say, is that these are different in every single scenario. And so until we have something that says that, hey, listen, if you will, kind of a rubrics almost, hey, listen, for this is what it's going to be. Yeah. And for this, until that happens, this will go on for eternity.
Well, I mean, there are national sentencing guidelines, right, for certain kinds of crimes. But to your point, I would make the argument that for the vast majority of these crimes, that the states have they have free will, and obviously the judges do as well. And so, we have this huge narrative in America of the states fighting federal control. And I think this is a good example of how we need more federal control, because if we don't, the states have too much.
Well, yeah, and that's what I mean. So it doesn't, it's like arguing with the cashier if your fries aren't in the bag. She didn't put the fries in the bag. You know what I mean? Whoever the expediter is, right? So arguing that a woman got 10 years, a woman who killed a man in his own house only got 10 years. I shouldn't say arguing, but it's really until there's actual change and policy in that. You can argue, you can march, you can do all these things, but until we get that person, that judge, out of there, until we get a judge in that will, whatever, then we're wasting our.
LaCreshia.
In addition to people paying close attention to the judicial elections and also monitoring like how these judges are ruling in cases, I want to promote that I'm actually not necessarily for universal guidelines, because we don't have universal life experiences. I believe, my personal philosophy when it comes to the law is that the people who have the most knowledge, who have most familiarity with the law, they should be held to a higher standard. Sure. And to me, it is unacceptable that you have people like cops just going rogue and killing people, and they're able to get away with it. Meanwhile, like you talked about her possibly getting out in 5 years. One of my brothers was arrested for like a cell phone robbery for a cell phone that was returned, and he had to spend like at least 4 of his formative years in jail. Like
for a cell phone?
Yes, for a cell phone robbery. And so to me, it's not fair. Like, my brother was like a young adult, like probably not even in his 20s yet, and had to spend that much time in jail. And I think we have to come to an honest conversation around that. The ruling class, or the people who the law is for right now, are the people with money, people who have access to power. And I don't think universal policies are like going to be or universal rulings or whatever are going to help us get out of that.
Well, you mentioned something I think is very important as well. I mean, we've got situations now, there are a couple of presidential candidates talking about this. Actually, there's one. It's Bernie Sanders. I'm not trying to plug him, but he's talking about changing the system of bail for crimes, which I think is nuts if you think about it. I mean, if you think about our judicial system, the way that it stands right now, there is, it's, as I've heard this phrase before, it's better to be rich and guilty than poor and innocent. Because if you have money, you can get out, you can get off, you can postpone, you can do whatever you need to do. Right. And that's pretty sick if you think about it, right? Because if we all commit the same crime, and James has the money to not sit in jail, but we don't, what is that? And so we've got to be talking about, I think, criminal justice reform from the top to the bottom. Absolutely. And we have to also allow people to, and really preach the narrative that because you criticize the police doesn't mean that you hate law enforcement. Right. Because you criticize the police doesn't mean that you don't care about law and order in the nation. You just recognize that they are fallible human beings. I literally just this week paid in the city of Chicago for a parking meter on a street, and walked into a building, and I was there for 25 minutes, paid my money on my phone, came back out, and I had a ticket. Now I've got to go and prove to them I'm guilty until I can prove myself innocent, because they made a mistake. Now I'm pretty angry about that, because now I've got to go and mail something and and hope. But these kinds of things happen at a small level. Imagine what happens when someone's life is at stake.
Yeah, I think, so here's my take on it. I really believe that more than anything, I think we have to focus in on the black community. I was talking to a friend and we were talking about what happened with Laquan McDonald, which was, when I saw the tape, I thought the police officer was on drugs. I mean, I swear, I don't know how you roll up. There's already police around. No one has done anything. And literally within seconds of arriving, he's shooting somebody. I honestly thought, is this guy on drugs or something? And I said, and I made a comment. We were talking about it. I said, well, what are we going to do about the next Laquan McDonald? And they were like, oh, we already got him. And the guy's already going to jail. I said, no. What are we as a black community going to do about the next Laquan McDonald? The next 16-year-old who's on drugs, the next 16-year-old who's in foster care, and no one knows where he is caring for him. What are we as a community doing to make sure that our young boys, black boys and black girls, are not growing up in an environment that says that they think I can go and do this? And I think that's really where part of the root is, that we've got to focus on our own community. Glenn Reedus, a friend of mine, is a freelance writer, posted an article that in St. Louis, they're sending the National Guard into these black communities because they're just crime-ridden, right? Everybody say, oh, it's a bad idea. And I said, here's what happens. Until the black community says, hey, we're gonna take care of our kids. We're gonna take care of our streets. We're gonna take care of what's going on. Someone who is not in the community will make a decision of what they think is best for the black community.
I'm gonna stop you right there. You guys agree with that?
Definitely not.
I mean, I didn't think you would.
No, I'll let JuWaun go first.
I mean, I was just, well, a couple of things. That was a lot. I'm a member of the National Guard. I mean, when I think about when folks talk about the Guard being present oftentimes in cities, is because they think we're supposed to patrol like a police force. And that's just completely antithetical to what the purpose of the Guard even is. I mean, it's supposed to be a quick response organization for natural disasters, high-level weather, unexpected weather events, so on and so forth. But I mean, to speak to us taking care of our communities, I think we do that, right? I think we spend a lot of time investing in organizations and institutions and each other, supporting each other. I think the reality is we're dealing with systemic forces that have a lot of power, and a lot of influence, right? And in order for us to overcome those, it can't just be, it's not just on us to say, hey, we need to organize and come together and build each other up without also being able to focus on the outside factors that are negatively impacting
We're going to close
us.
out in this segment in just 1 second. I want to give you last word. So I know that, having been your professor, that the idea, there's this historic argument in the black community, the Booker T versus the WEB argument, that at what level does the government have institutional responsibility? At what level do we need to fight for our own communities? And I've kind of been on both sides of that ideologically over the years, but I know kind of where I believe. I would like for you to speak to that quickly, and then we're going to close out the segment.
I think the answer is complicated, but I mean, for the most part, I do disagree with this notion that it's on us to fix us. Because I live on the west side of Chicago, and every day when I go to work, I pass black people who are addicted to drugs, black people who don't have access to employment, even I'm facing black people in my family and friend circle who are being evicted, who don't have a place to live. That's the poor black class, and most of us are poor. Most of us don't have money. We know that. I think there's a huge racial disparity in terms of our wealth gap. There's a 200-year wealth gap between blacks and whites in this nation, and so you're telling the people who've been kicked down time and time again that it's on them to get up and to support the other people who've been kicked down. Yes, it is to a certain degree. We should support each other, and we've been, to JuWaun's point, we've been trying to do that, right? We do the best that we can with the resources that we have. We're on this stage doing that, but I will say that there are some black people who are not doing that, and that to me is the bourgeoisie class, the people who moved out of the hood, the people who have the academic knowledge, the institutional knowledge to understand what is happening to these people in the community, and they're not present in the community. They're not doing enough, but it's not just on even them. We have a government that's supposed to work for us. Our government is about resources, and why after 400 years of being in this country and being a destabilized community, why isn't our government doing more to support us? Like, the bottom line is we need reparations.
Absolutely,
And
yeah, absolutely.
that's that.
I would say we just did that reparations show a little while ago.
Yeah.
But it's a very important conversation. We talk about institutions. Look at how the power of the federal government. The federal government has in our country has given tax breaks to the largest corporation in America, and I believe in the world, if I'm not mistaken, Amazon, which is raked in $7 billion last year, didn't pay a cent in taxes. And if the federal government can do that and provide incentives for them to make money, I don't want to hear what else they can't do. Anyway, you're watching Change with Ted Williams. We'll be right back.